Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this webinar today. We're going to be talking to you about EEAT. I'm Megan, I'm Operations Director here at Wolfenden, and I am joined by Ellie, who is our Director of PR, and Tom, who is our Head of SEO. So yeah, thanks so much, and we'll just get right into it. So let's start off with the obvious. Tom, do you mind telling us a bit about what is actually EEAT?
So EAT is essentially how Google judges the content and overall quality of your website. Stands for experience, expertise, authority, and trust. And essentially, it's 4 separate guidelines that Google uses to assess whether they believe your site should be the one that serves the result of the query.
Yeah, and it has changed over time, hasn't it? So it used to just be 3 elements, and they've introduced the 4th one more recently, haven't they?
Yeah, so experience was added recently to essentially create a division between expertise, because you can do it in 2 aspects. You can have expertise on a topic, so whether you're, say, a doctor writing medical information, or you can have experience with the topic, say you've got a product and you're reviewing it after your use.
Yeah, okay, great. Is it more important for some sectors or sites than others? Who should really be paying attention to these guidelines?
So it's important for all websites. There's a bit of a common misconception. It's only for your money, your life websites that are providing health or financial information. But ultimately, the EEAT is how Google judges every website.
Yeah, and how does the review process work? So in terms of doing a manual review, obviously not every site's going to be manually reviewed, are they?
No.
So
so it's not actually a ranking factor. It's more that not every site gets manually reviewed, but it's just a way in which they read and assess your content. There's no specific guidelines for that to happen. The only sort of guidelines are you create high quality content that's original and made for users, not search engines. Outside of that, there are some core technical aspects you can do for your website, but ultimately it's a very content-led process. It just is trying to find high quality content.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Can you talk to us a little bit more about some of those technical aspects that you can actually optimize for?
Yeah, so in terms of technical aspects, a lot of it's to do with, I suppose, how your content is displayed. So for example, you might have your content on a page. How is that page structured? Is there an author bio, for example?
Yeah.
You also have, say, whether you have, say, reviews of your website. Do you have reviews put on page? Or ultimately aspects of, say, for e-commerce, part of the buyer journey, do you have safe secure payment links?
Yeah.
Do you have accreditation for you in certain industries? So a lot of it is about from a technical aspect, it's about building up the trust factors and authority factors around that expertise content.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And picking up on the trust factors, obviously, this is also something where PR can play a big part in terms of authority and trust in building into websites. So I don't know if you mind telling us a little bit about that, Ellie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that PR plays quite a significant role in how brands are perceived, and obviously from a trust perspective specifically, there's a lot to be said for being aware of brands and kind of seeing them being talked about within relevant publications, and I guess speaking to audiences that they want to be speaking to. I think specifically from a digital PR perspective, when it comes to trust, there's ways of, I guess, implementing certain styles of PR campaign that are going to feed into building trust. Obviously, there's expert, which I guess we'll talk about a little bit more when we get onto expert, and kind of being seen as an expert, which obviously builds trust within a certain topic. But also specifically, data-led PR is a really strong way of building expertise, and kind of building that trust with your audience, because if you're kind of able to earn some data, it's tangible. It's something that I think your audience sees as real and true, and that's why I think we see so much kind of strength in terms of our data-led campaigns in building that trust with your audience, but also with journalists as well. When you're able to provide them something of real substance, it builds that kind of two-way trust path, and then obviously you get the coverage off the back of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go in a little bit more into detail into each of these factors, I suppose. We've just been picking up on trust.
Mm.
What are some specific areas that you think that we can specifically say this is something that will improve your trust? Not only for search engines and to rank better, obviously, but also for the people who visit your website.
I would say probably a lot of the technical factors that I sort of highlighted, because ultimately the trust is what is formed from, say, the expertise. If you've reviewed something, you've had that, look over the product, that expertise is going to build trust. Same way with your authoritativeness. Say you are a doctor writing medical content.
Yeah.
Actually, can you put a link to your accreditations? Can you write what accreditations you have? That ultimately builds trust in what what you're saying.
Yeah.
At the same time, people have trust in websites as a whole. That can come from a strong brand, for example.
Yeah.
Or actually whether, say, a lot of people are linking through to your content, referring you. Say you have citations going to other websites based on information you put in that content. All of that ultimately builds into those trust factors.
Yeah.
That get people trusting your website.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think you picked up as well in there about that obviously also reinforces your expertise. Are there any other ways that we think that an e-commerce site specifically can work to reinforce their expertise?
I think a lot of those factors can actually be external, in fact, linked to the digital PR aspect.
Yeah.
And a lot of that can also link to on-site factors. So if for example, it's a product that is difficult to use or takes quite a lot of specialist knowledge to use, writing how-to guides on site, showing that you're the expert in using this product in its set application, that can then get fed out to wider publications. You can then be seen as a voice around that sort of topic or product area.
Yeah, and I think expert-led's really lucrative from a digital PR perspective. It's a tactic that works really well, obviously for getting links through your kind of quote attributions and so on, but also that kind of approach in terms of really building your presence to your audience and showing them what you are experts in, being able to provide kind of insight, tips, advice to the consumer that they might not necessarily know whether that's really clearly aligned with what you offer from a product perspective or from a wider kind of topical perspective. It works really well just to build your expert presence.
And I think it doesn't have to just be, say, how-tos and wider bits, but actually, say it's a complex product on your product pages, having in-depth product information that actually answers users' questions and queries within that sort of product description, and some of that information can get sort of fed back out into PR, hopefully, especially on product descriptions. If other websites start to pick up on if it's just sort of selling a similar product, if they then begin to sort of add in similar ideas and areas, that's ultimately showing that everyone thinks what you're doing is that's an expert way of doing it.
Yeah. How can you tell if, obviously you can do everything you can to make your expertise as strong as possible? How do you think you can tell if you're the leader, or how can you match the leaders in your specific space?
So it's ultimately quite a subjective concept. There's no tick list of these are everything you need to do. There's kind of well-established things that I've sort of mentioned in terms of the technical aspects or areas to look at, but that's all very much I guess it's sort of a subjective thing. Really, the only way you can tell is by looking at, say, who ranks above you, where other people similar queries where they rank, and actually do a bit of analysis, say, of their website versus yours. And a lot of it's a feel element. When you go on a website, how do you feel about that website compared to when you go on your own website? Is there certain indicators there that you think, actually, I think they give me that trust to then carry on with that sort of buying process or anything like that? And I guess adopt the strong ideas, get areas that you think people aren't doing well, make sure you don't do them, or make sure they're not on your website. It's a lot of a research process, reviewing, adding, reviewing again, and go from there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So yeah, I think we've touched on quite a lot already around kind of the expertise, authority, and trust areas specifically. Obviously the new one, experience. I wonder if you could I think you might have touched on it a bit earlier, but if you could maybe clarify a little bit what actually we're looking for when we're talking about experiences this part, because I think it's something that often gets confused, doesn't it?
Yeah, so a lot of people think experience is actual sort of on-site experience. But I suppose more a UX point of view, or actually how the website looks and feels. As I sort of highlighted before, what it's actually doing is decoupling expertise, because you can have, you know, expertise and experience are kind of one and the same, but different. As I say, the expertise is if you are an expert in a topic area. Traditionally, people would think, you know, if you reviewed a product, for example, you're an expert in that area, but you're not. You've just used that product. So at that point, that's where the experience comes in.
Yeah.
And it's you having an experience that you're then able to talk about, which, you know, a real life experience of something is ultimately going to give a good review or a good bit of insight, but it doesn't mean you have to mean you're the expert on it.
Yeah. So on site, the ways to get across that is somebody's first-hand experience. Obviously, it's reviews.
Yeah,
on your own site.
pictures of you using the product, for example, you know, a vlog of you using the product, a link back to, you know, say for example, I would say X product to review by Y, and you know, all of that indicating that you actually had a real life experience with this.
Yeah, makes total sense. And then I suppose, Ellie, from an external point of view, how can sites work to convey that experience point elsewhere?
So there's a couple of ways that you can do that. I think case studies are a brilliant resource in kind of getting that real life, real world version of your product or service out there into the press. And that's really strong from a kind of showing an experience with a brand opportunity. But also I think that there's often certain publications that within your sector will do reviews of a kind, or you know, they will have listicles of products and so on. And there's really nice kind of ways of making sure that other people are showing their experience, not necessarily just on site. So for example, Good Housekeeping have a whole product testing team, and they will regularly feature. IndieBest do the same thing. And if you're making sure that your products are featured in there, your brand's featured in there, and someone else externally is being able to show their experience with your product and service, that's going to work in your favour.
And that can link back nicely to trust factors. So if, for example, on your website you have a as seen in section linking through back to those different articles where people have, you know, use your products or services, and it's kind of building that, I suppose, that cyclical period. But
Yeah. Especially for new and emerging brands, obviously having those kind of logos not only means that you've got that coverage elsewhere, but it also means that, you know, that people know they can trust you because that you've been trusted by these well-known publications. Okay. How, I suppose, can we talk a little bit, I guess, about kind of measuring the impact? Is there any way that you think you can measure how you've done, how I guess well you've succeeded at any of these factors?
So as I sort of said, because there's not any specific sort of guidelines here to say any SEO, it's quite subjective in a lot of sense. What you can do, you can utilize tools to get a bit of an idea. I think a good example is SEM Rush's authority score. You know, people can sort of use that as a bit of a benchmark. If they see their authority score going up, they can sort of think, oh, we'll probably do something right. Similarly, you know, if they look at another website that has another higher authority score than theirs, they can hopefully take ideas from that. But ultimately, those tools are third party, not directly related, and it's kind of very much just used as a bit of a guideline. But as I guess the overall point, much more, I've said before, down to your own personal feel and what you sort of feel of it, and then taking those ideas and I suppose benchmarking against other people.
Yeah, benchmarking against your competitors in this space. And from an external point of view, is there any way that you think you can measure how you've started to improve along these factors?
Yeah, I think, again, like Tom said, it's quite subjective.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's a lot of PR tools and off-site tools and so on that you can use, but they often give more of the vanity metrics, if that's fair to say. I think perhaps in the past those vanity metrics were deemed as the ones that would actually, I guess, highlight success, but we're kind of moving away from those more and more. And when I say vanity metrics, I mean things like volume of links, volume of coverage, domain authority of coverage, things like that. Still good to look at them to give yourself like a bit of a benchmark, but I don't necessarily think that can kind of be used to deem success. I think now it's much more about, I guess, your share of voice within a certain topic.
Mm.
And again, your presence within those specific relevant publications and relevancy is so important in that space. But I think, you know, how much of that conversation are you holding as a brand versus your competitors and so on, and benchmarking that way as opposed to giving yourself an arbitrary number to work towards.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think something that we talked about the other day as well is, you know, with kind of the changing of the search results pages potentially, and some of these publications kind of taking a bit of a lead when it comes to the search engine rankings. Like that's another thing you want to be looking at, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, you're not always going to be able to compete for position 1, 2, 3 around a certain topic.
Yeah.
If a really strong publication is holding that place, instead we want to make sure that we're featuring in that publication, we're featuring within that article that's ranking really well. It's just another way of being able to serve yourself as a brand and your relevant content to the consumer.
Yeah.
And I think as well, because there's a crossbow information on product searches, because they're becoming so conversational, and with the sort of new AI search features coming in, actually where people would traditionally say pick a keyword for their article, look at whether the ranking's gone up and down. Obviously there's a lot of other external factors that go into that, but now because so many different terms or ways to be used to search a single query, actually it does become a lot more difficult in that sense to measure against direct individual rankings.
Yeah, so you really need to look at your whole search landscape, who's appearing within the search landscape, and how you can actually match that, you know, the intent of the people who are coming to visit you, make sure that you're visible. Okay, great. So I suppose going back a little bit, I suppose, to on-site and things that you can do. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about content. These really are factors that are looking at content. So Tom, I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit more about kind of the process of looking at how you can get your content strategy to meet these factors. What goes into that?
I think from the first instance, it's probably actually about identifying what you want to achieve from your content, what you want to achieve from your content strategy. You know, kind of, in a lot of senses, you can split between the expertise and experience. You know, say WebMD will always have the expertise side of things, whereas a review website will always have the experience side of things. You're not always going to be able to target both. It's about understanding which area you're wanting to target and making a plan around that. But in terms of developing your content strategy, say we're focusing on experience, a lot of that will be about actually identifying which are the key topics that are relevant to you. You know, do you have experience in those topics? And I suppose creating a content plan to target all those individual areas to showcase your experience in those areas. At the same time, from an expertise point of view, it'd be kind of very similar to, similar to experience. You do your keyword research, identify important topics within that sphere, and write content to target those queries.
Yeah, okay. And then how, I suppose, does the PR side of things tie in with that content strategy?
Yeah, so the digital PR is really to amplify that work that's been done, and the two things need to work in tandem to work well.
Yeah.
But I think I've kind of alluded to it already, but in terms of the digital PR element specifically, it's really about making sure that you're utilising that content that's available, and pushing that out to the right audiences, so the audiences are seeing that content in some format. And whether that is through your expert-led and it's through your commentary pieces, or whether it is through something a little bit more creative in terms of a data-led campaign, or whatever it may be, and really making sure that then we're looking to link back to that content as well where we can. I think that's something that's obviously quite obvious but quite pivotal in terms of making sure that whilst we're talking a lot about brand and about what that can do for brand perception and kind of supporting EEAT through that, obviously there's the kind of back element of always making sure that we're getting those links to those areas on the site as well, just to give those further authority points to the search engine.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then I guess once you've kind of done your in an ideal world, you've kind of put together your content strategy, your content's going live, everything's getting linked back to, how do you then continue to iterate that strategy and grow over time?
I would probably say a lot of it begins with going back to your original start point. You know, content in itself is constantly evolving, and so is the keyword landscape. So essentially what you would do is go back to your start point, work out the keyword topics. Is our content still relevant to those? Have other people created new, more insightful content? Is there any new developments? Is there any new resources or other people talking about this topic that I can actually link to. Ultimately, a lot of it and a lot of ways to do it is refreshing content. Refreshing content is a great thing to do. You've already got a lot of authority built to it, and that when Google can see content is updated and it's sort of being reviewed and reworked, they sort of see that as a good thing compared to creating a whole new article and then potentially have sort of conflicting ideas on a site. But yeah, essentially it's a cyclical process. You look at what you've got. Are you still targeting the right things? If you are, how can you update, change them? Is there any new areas to look at? And it's just about constantly finding more queries, answering those questions in the right way, and just building up your wider content base.
Yeah. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how we kind of monitor that as well in terms of our process at looking at the market and what's getting mentioned.
So what we like to do here is we create a keyword universe where we essentially look for all the different queries that are sort of available in areas. So traditionally, agencies might choose 100, 150 keywords to rank for. What we look to do instead is maybe to create a universe of 5,000-6,000 keywords. We then categorize them into topics, and from within them topics, what we do instead of trying to focus on individual rankings, we sort of benchmark against market share, where we basically want to say within this keyword topic, our share of voice or market share is X amount. So within that, it kind of goes back to what I was saying, is not trying to target these individual queries and caring about one term going up 1 or 2 positions, but actually within the wider sphere, how are we being seen? How are we sort of developing or growing overall? And then how is that comparing to other websites?
Yeah, and that does help in terms of narrowing down which areas of your site you might actually need to iterate over time, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly, because actually what you might find is where you thought you were really strong, you're actually probably not as strong as you thought you were, and then you might think, oh, this is an area I need to work out straight away. In other sections, it's actually we're quite strong in an area now, but we're maybe overall just a bit behind our sort of 3-4 main competitors, and with that slight push, we can sort of really begin to drive some organic growth. It's kind of really about prioritizing where you are, where you want to be, and how long you want to take to get there, and then the best way to go from there.
Yeah, and then I guess in terms of that topic-based approach, again, kind of that helps us narrow down what we're doing from a PR point of view as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, PR can be a minefield, so being able to actually have some narrowed down focuses for us to kind of prioritise from a topic perspective, then means that we can do research around publications that are relevant to that sector in terms of the conversations around that topic. We can also kind of channel it down to actual specific questions that people are asking, information that people are looking for, to be able to make sure that the digital PR kind of content that we're creating answers those questions and kind of comes full circle to making sure that we're covering off those topics externally within the press on behalf of the brand.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Is there any other ways that you feel like brands could better align their kind of SEO and digital PR strategies to maximize success?
No, I think a lot of it goes back to what Ellie's been saying. I think it's just about always utilising the strong on-site resources externally. I think one of the ways where SEO and PR campaigns fail a lot of the time is trying to work too much in silo and not having a consistent voice or message. What you talk about on-site needs to be reflected off-site as well, and everything ultimately works in harmony. You create good content on-site, you show good expertise or authority, that's going to naturally create more backlinks, it's going to give you more opportunity to push out ideas and spread your share of voice further. It's about working together and constantly seeing how one person can help each other. Similarly with data-led campaigns, are there opportunities to, instead of all the data going to other websites and the websites getting all our great work, can we then host that on site and actually get the websites naturally linking back to our data rather than pushing out individual pieces? There's loads of ways, but ultimately it's just a back and forth process and making sure you're working together consistently.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's collaboration. I think the two arms, well, it's 3 arms really, isn't it? The technical, the content, and the PR. But as 2 teams, we need to work as collaboratively as possible, and communications just means that you're working towards the same goal.
Yeah, and definitely obviously with the client side from an agency point of view as well. But I think you all elements of SEO all need lots of collaboration all the time. Okay, so then I guess wider than this, what would you say we should be measuring overall to say our organic strategy has been a success? What are the main KPIs that you look at when we're saying an SEO campaign is working?
So the main thing we always look at is market share. I think it encompasses such a wide range of elements, and kind of, I'll say before, instead of looking at where you rank for a specific term and being happy with, say, 5 vanity keywords that might actually be searched in 10, 15 different ways that you're not capturing, just building a big idea of the overall search landscape and measuring your market share within specific categories, I think is probably the best and clearest way of showing where you are and where you think you can get to against your competitors.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And obviously you want to make sure that that market share is translating through to traffic and ultimately revenue for.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. You know, once you see that market share rising, the idea is that then that would be then translating into, you know, firstly impressions, there's a growth of impressions as you're sort of getting up the search result, then your clicks will ultimately get better, and yeah, obviously the final thing is always revenue, but you want to sort of show that staged process of growth.
Yeah, of course. It all flows from actually being more visible, doesn't it? Yeah, okay. And then I guess from a PR point of view, what would we then say? Obviously, it all needs to feed into the SEO progress, doesn't it? But there are ways in which you can say, yes, this really worked for us from a PR perspective.
So big picture, it's exactly the same as what Tom said. Obviously, we're all feeding into the market share and then what that can move into. But I think from a PR perspective, as I say, it's from a brand perspective, it's definitely share of voice and how much of that space you're taking up. And obviously compared to competitors as well. But from an organic perspective, specifically for digital PR, you know, we're able to look at growth of the site's propensity to rank for those keywords within that topic area based on us targeting those areas from a link acquisition perspective. How have we supported that through not only links but brand mentions and so on, and you can kind of see the direct link between the two, which is always really nice. When you can see those going up at the same time when you've been kind of targeting that area and you're starting to see the growth in that way. Obviously from a wider, I guess, audience perspective, from a PR specifically, it's also nice to be able to see any referral traffic that's going directly to the site through the activity that we've pushed out, because obviously it's showing a direct link of, I guess, interest between the audience that we're reaching and what we're actually talking about, and conversions off the back of that as well for your e-commerce brands, obviously. But yeah, it's being able to kind of view how much of the media space you've taken up, I guess, as a predominant thing. And then of course you've got your vanity metrics like the links you've acquired, where those links have gone to, where they've come from, and so on and so forth. But it all works together, I think, to be able to show a bigger picture of how much your strategy's actually worked. Yeah, no, definitely agree. Okay, great. Do we have any final points, I suppose, that we want to leave everyone with on EEAT? Tom, do you have anything that you would also want to say?
I would say the main thing is just ultimately all boils down to how good your content is and how trustworthy your website is. You know, don't worry too much about really minute little changes or factors, and just look at the big picture.
Yeah.
Anything else from you, Ellie?
I guess speaking from a digital PR bias perspective, make sure that you have a digital PR strategy in place to support your content and your technical, because it's a hugely important element of getting your experience, your expertise out there and really building that trust and that brand presence within the digital space. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Thank you everyone so much for attending the webinar. We'll have been answering questions throughout, but if you've got any further questions, feel free to let us know, and we'll be sending across the recording to everyone else. So feel free to get in touch. And thank you, and we'll see you again soon.